it's going to be hard for a prosecutor or a police officer to arrest a person if their information is not in the DNA database.
That database is what law enforcement uses to compare DNA evidence they collect. But if a person isn't in the system, there's nothing to match it to.
It's extremely frustrating for victims. I mean, victims have every right to see justice sought in the criminal justice system. DNA is almost 99.9% accurate now in the criminal justice system. Under Arizona law, the police officers can go and do an investigation for a suspect's DNA. However, under Arizona law, you have to be either charged, arrested, or convicted for a crime in order for that DNA to go into the DNA database.
But if there's a match in these swabs taken, the suspect will be arrested and charged.
Eventually have a trial to see whether or not they'll get convicted, and their DNA will then go into the DNA database once they've been arrested or charged with a crime.
You don't need to go out and use extreme force. It should be force that's necessary to remove the child. If you go in there with extreme force, that could cause even more harm and trauma to the child.
A written reprimand is just a slap on the wrist. That's nothing.
Johnson's attorney, Benjamin Taylor, not happy with that decision. He's also upset that these 3 officers on the sidelines were cleared of any wrongdoing.
The officers who were there who didn't stop it, they're just as guilty as the officers who were punching.
But the fight for justice, Taylor says, isn't over.
If you can't get justice in the criminal way, meaning that these officers weren't prosecuted, you have to get justice in the civil way. What they did to Mr. Robert Johnson was uncalled for. These officers should be fired and terminated.
Taylor says the beating still traumatizes his client.
Yeah, right now he still suffers from, seeing Mesa police around his neighborhood. Yeah. That's a very emotional stress. He still suffers physical injuries from what they did to him.
I don't want this to happen to no one in this system.
There's no reason to hide this. There's reason to be honest, come forward and apologize and let us see the video of what happened that day. When they try to take the law into their own hands, they could affect the justice system in a negative way.
Benjamin Taylor is a defense attorney, and he says there could be problems admitting evidence into court.
I think a defense attorney has a strong argument to say that these tapes and videos that these truckers are making should be thrown out of court.
If you don't keep your child safe in Arizona, you could be subject to child abuse or child neglect, which are felony offenses. Because the child is 8 years old, they weren't required to be in a booster seat, but they are still required to be in the seatbelt and safely strapped in. So if the parents didn't have their child in the seatbelt, these parents could be subject to criminal endangerment, child abuse, if they were the cause of their child being hurt.
Giving the officer probation and the ability to get this off his record is very weak of the prosecutor. If anybody else on the streets were to punch anybody in the face, they'll be definitely facing assault charges, which are felony charges.